Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to present asteroids and the solstice. So though I'm not doing new moons or full moons any longer, I thought I'd still keep in all the eclipses that I could and the solstice ingress charts because they're so important. So the feature that the solstice chart brings to us is that it is not only an Aries point sun, but it's also a, shall we say, a chart of the longest day of the year. But it's a predictive chart in certain schools of astrology. So in Uranian, which is what I study, the solstice chart features predictions that will happen before we actually hit the solstice and will go on for several months after the solstice. So the solstice for this year is June 21st, 2023. I did Washington, D.C. for 11:01 a.m. And because it's a solstice chart, the majority of the chart takes place in the Aries point, which means that this is a chart that's going to affect us all. With that said, I did do this particular chart for Washington, D.C., and the irony of ironies, the midheaven of the D.C. chart is in the solstice sun axis. So I thought that was really interesting. It makes this a really interesting chart to look at. But more than that, the amount of asteroids that fell in the axis, the Aries axis, along with the trans-Neptunians, is quite a lot. And that makes it a really good learning chart. So I thought we would do a real deep dive on the solstice. So I want you to pay attention to what's being said, because even though I'm doing this about a week or two, maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, it's actually still in effect. And you're probably going to, some of this will sound familiar. Let's just put it that way. And it's going to be about those conditions that you might get some really good information from these asteroids. So without further ado, thank you for watching the video. Thank you for being here. And most importantly, thank you for supporting my small channel. With that said, let's go look at the ingress chart for June 21st, 2023. As always, we're going to begin with the chart. The pizza pie chart is one of my teachers calls it. I just call it a regular chart, a wheel, if you will. And I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot on the wheel because where all the real magic occurs is on the 90-degree dial, which we'll get to in a moment. I do want to point out that the 29 degree 56 minutes is a very, yes, it's, you would think it's only going to be going, it's going to be going from the fixed into the mutable. And so you're saying, how is that in the Aries point? Well, it actually is because Pluto is just on the other side, as it's right between the cardinals and the fixed, and they create a triangle. And we'll look at that in a moment. There is so much to look at in this chart, particularly from the perspective of the asteroids. But before I get to that, I do want to point out that at 29 degrees 56 minutes, and I know some astrologers work with this and some don't, but I do, it really is talking about an end of a cycle or ending things. So there's things that are completing within this cycle of the solstice chart. So for the United States, there could be some completion of some things. And the other thing that we're going to be talking about to some degree is the fact that it is conjunct within the degree Vesta at 29, here we are, 29 degrees Taurus. So you have on that midheaven some really interesting stuff. Yet about 8 minutes away, you have you also have Sedna. I want to make sure I was saying the right one. Sedna. Sedna is an interesting it's an interesting point. I think it is an asteroid. But Sedna, and I should double check that before I even say that, is not something that I use a lot. But I do want to point out, I did write in my notes that it really does have to do with how we're influenced by, in all of our cases, our parents. Okay, for good or bad, particularly our mother has had a strong influence on who we are and the directions that we choose to head in. Okay, and I did want to say that because it's going to come up later when I get to the dial. I did talk about that just a little. I'm not real good on Sedna, but I thought that it was pretty interesting that it's running on the midheaven with Vesta. I mean, we're talking like really tight and within a degree type stuff, which means they're real, we call it BAM, okay? Now, because of the kind of astrologer that I am, being an asteroid astrologer, we do go out as far as 10 degrees on either side to pull in all the conversations. Though I always like to point out to people that if you're looking at something on the very outer edge, it's going to be a theme of what's going on in your life, but not necessarily direct. Okay, so in other words, it weakens it a little bit. Now, the sun still falls in that 10th house of the chart, and you can see it. And it is in the Aries point, 0 degrees, Cancer, 0 degrees. So it's the solstice opposite of the ingress, which is at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So that's the ingress, which is done in the wintertime, and this is the one we do for the summertime. So with that said, there's some really interesting even aspects to this chart. And so just to take a little peek at those aspects, and again, not getting in too much to the asteroids yet, I do want to point out, here we go again on the United States ascendant. Anyone who lives here knows that the whole presidential election is here we go again. But also the president getting indicted after indictment is here we go again. So there's a lot of here we goes again, just having to do with DC. So we can see that that Sisyphus, which is this little man who's pushing that rock, okay, he's again less than a degree, so I'm really going with the really sharp ones right now, is pretty obvious, okay. As far as here's another one, just trying to keep, this is a slightly over a degree, but you have ornamenta, which is running on the descendant. What is ornamenta? Okay, ornament is like an ornament. Okay, so you think jewelry, you think, those little things on cars that they used to put, or they still put on the front of them. They're ornaments. Okay, I've heard the concept hood ornaments. Okay. Boats used to have them on the mast, so they're just like these elements of, I want to say advertising, but really they're just not even about advertising, they're just ornamental. And we have to think about this ornamental as it's a descendant function. So the descendant is the people we're dealing with, the one-to-one encounters. And who is it that we're encountering? That's ornamental. Or what is it about our significant relationships that are ornamental? Okay, so just something to think about in the scheme of things. So these are just the general things I want to just pull out a little bit here. I'm not going to go to the 10 degrees on either side because I'm trying to keep this more of an Aries chart, Aries or a world chart. And I don't really need to go into all the things going on in the United States. I think there's another example in here somewhere, but it's also what the next example is actually at the Aries point. So that means that we might be dealing with this here in the United States, but I guarantee you, I don't care where you are in the world, you're still dealing with it. Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. That has to do more with the trans-Neptunians. So as we get to, and I always get ahead of myself on these, I want to jump ahead here and I want to look at my aspect, my aspect list, okay? And what I want to look at, I thought what was going on with the moon was really interesting, so we could start off with that. I love the contraparallel to Pluto. I do want to point out that even with the square to Jupiter, it's still fairly good energy. It does give us some degree of optimism. The moon is opposite, or contraparallel, I should say, to Cupido while it's parallel to Mercury. So when you think about things like that, think of the contraparallels a little bit more like an opposition. And so we got a moon opposition going on with Cupido. And that's interesting because the moon often is related to Cupido. It's our family, our home. So how is the home, the family, separated from the community or the larger group? Could be a very big question right now. I love the moon in parallel to Mercury because there's a correlation between what we're thinking and what we're feeling. But I particularly want to point out the moon in conjunction to Venus. Okay. And I like the parallel to the sun as well. Always really good to have good aspects between the sun and the moon. It gives us a lot more confidence in ourselves. And with Venus, we're all just going to be nice. So I want to say first off that you would look at this moon and it's a little bit deceiving because you would think, wow, shouldn't be a very difficult chart, but it is. Okay. These are just some of the side issues, and I think when you look at the moon in contraparallel to Pluto is a better explanation. Okay, so and that is the resistance to the transformations that we're all going through, and you can't stop that. You can resist it, but then it goes back to, I guess it's the Tao. I actually said this to somebody who really knows her stuff. I thought it was Buddhist, the role, but it's actually Taoist. So we have to be a little bit more like a Taoist right now. And that means we have to learn to accept what's going on around us because it's inevitable and we can't do anything to stop it. And by trying to resist, we're only going to cause ourselves more difficulty. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean on a political that you don't stand up for what you believe in. No, no, no. I think that part of the change deals with the people. Okay, see, here we have a square to Apollon, which if you think of Apollon as the many or business in particular, the moon is squaring that. Okay. Understand that the will of the people in many countries, if not all, but I'm going to go with many because I don't know world cultures as well as I should. I'm going to say to you that the will of the people is not the will of the government, and that the governments could be trying to encapsulate something from another time. Really, it's another culture, really. That's why we can't judge history. We can't judge history because it was another culture. That's why the people trying to change the wording in the way authors wrote their book, that's foolish. They came through a different culture. We need to respect that. But by the same token, we, the people, are creating a different culture. And our governments will soon have to accept that. Okay, a little speech for me. So, some beautiful stuff with that moon. Okay, just beauty. And I love the moon conjunct Venus because yeah, it's a little selfish in some respects, not as bad as the sun, but I got to be honest with you, it's people being nice. And I had a wonderful experience the end of last week, a few days ago, really. And it's something I like to do. It's a walk I like to take. And it's through technically a homeless corridor. But those people are so nice. I know it sounds weird, doesn't it? They're so nice. And one of the things I experienced was, I think, some great kindnesses. And I was able to witness some great kindnesses. It just warmed my heart. So do that. Do that for yourself. Go out there. Because underneath all the hatred, underneath all this stuff that the governments are putting on us, there's some really wonderful kindness. And we should all experience that because it really warms your heart. Now, where we want to look, unfortunately, is down at the sun. And the sun, and you say to yourself, oh, look, sun trine Saturn. Saturn is not Saturn is not a good planet. I mean, it's not a bad planet. I like my Saturn. But I'm a disciplined person. I've learned through my Saturn to be very disciplined. Part of my dance training. You learn to be disciplined. And things that require hard work require discipline. And one of the things that we're going to have to accept is that we're going to have to be more disciplined, because I think that, and I think we're accepting it. There's the trying, but you have to accept those responsibilities. You must accept that discipline if we're to do what we're here to do. The sun is also parallel Mercury. So our mind is in sync with our emotional selves and our will. And that's a good thing. It's also in sync with the moon. So it still looks good, you say. Look at that conjunction to partners. That's disconcerting. Oh, wait, I've done a lot of astrology, and I can tell you that when somebody has a very strong connection to a partner asteroid, I'll give you a couple examples here, would be Juno. The counterpart of Juno is, Hera. Okay. Bano. So some of these asteroids, okay, also relate to relationships. When they're really connected to a person's sun, ascendant, sometimes the moon, they tend to be very dependent on those partnerships. And I mean dependent, where the point is they don't really do anything on their own. They're really geared toward partnerships. Not a bad thing in a personal chart, not necessarily a good thing. It just is what is, as all things in astrology are. But if we're looking at the United States chart and we're looking at our partnerships, that may be something to really look at. Plus that opposition to Cupido. Okay, the sun is, again, like the moon. I don't say opposition because that's not what it is. It's actually a contraparallel. It's me doing shortcuts all the time. Okay, so again, you say to and it's trining Apollon, right? But it squares the Aries point, even though it is an Aries point, because it is an Aries point. Okay, just really interesting what's going to take place within our country. Okay. The next place that I really felt important to look at, and I'll show you why in a minute, was Pluto. Pluto is a very active member of this particular solstice chart, which is why I find it so interesting. There, along the way, have been charts that I've skipped over or missed, sometimes because I didn't feel like, particularly when we come to asteroids, there was a whole lot there for me. This chart, quite the opposite. Okay, so we're looking at Pluto, and I also want to take a look at Neptune, which is sextiling Pluto, okay? Squaring the sun, opposing Ceres, the mother, the parents, sextiling the midheaven. We're going to be looking at this stuff on a dial, okay? Neptune and Pluto are rather difficult planets. They have good points. They do indeed. They have difficult aspects. Okay, they tend to be difficult because Neptune, as much as it's compassion and it has a spiritual side, it's deception and being deceived. Okay? Remember that Poseidon is in the Aries point. Just keep that in mind because that's propaganda. It's enlightenment, but it's propaganda. See how we go with this? Ironically, Poseidon and Neptune are connected. One is a higher frequency of the other. How about that for a little trivia? And that's something to really look at in all of this, because you're going to find out that they are an aspect to each other on these dials. What do we believe? Okay? And we didn't even get to the AI part yet. You know what? Like somebody said in class, I think it was one of my teachers in class, might have been Gary, who said, when you can't trust the world without, you have to go within. We're learning. Pluto is also quite heavy. Look at that Pluto sextiling Neptune. Okay. Pluto's trining the work, but it's contraparalleling the sun. It's trining the midheaven. It's trining Cupido. Do you see that? Like it's not working with the sun and the moon. It's working in opposition to that. And it's trining Astrea. This is going to go on. This transformation is only beginning. That's why it's really hard for us to really understand what's going on. Because what's going on right now is we're looking at the micro. But Pluto is asking, and Neptune and Poseidon are all asking us to look at the macro. And that's harder for people to see. That's a lot harder. So there's also a trine to Admetus. Okay? And remember how we had all those parallels to Mercury? Well, Uranian astrologers will know that Admetus is a higher frequency of Mercury. And now we got a trine. It's amazing. So you can see that Pluto bumping up against everything. And yet Pluto is the great transformer. So let's have a look at the dial. Here we are. So, wow, there's so much. We got notes. Okay, there's so much to chat about here. There's so much. So in the Aries point, the idea of caretaking, whether it's as a parent or taking care of yourself, or whether we're talking about food, okay, because that's all in there. You got Demeter. Okay, let's go up here and look, because this is unbelievable. This chart just went ding, 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 ding to me. Okay, so I'm only going to go, here we go again. I'm not going to go out further than like a degree. Okay, I'm going to try to stay very Uranian on this, which I was originally taught is 2.5 degrees. I think some people it's 2 or under. I think everybody's slightly different on this. When you get to these dials in particular, you really don't want to use too wide of an orb because you are looking at opposition squares, semi-square. I mean, you're looking at it all on the dial, so it really behooves us to keep these really close orbs. But I want to, did I mention this? Okay, so if you live anywhere else in the world and you're not affected by the East Coast chart, where you see this blue, this is still Vesta. So Vesta, work, goals, things at a distance, our friends, our sisters, okay, are all related to this triangle that we now see here with that Aries point. Okay, and a lot of the stuff I talked about is even showing already. But look at this. Okay, so we have, and I'm going to do this kind of in order of how striking. Okay, so you've got, first let's start with Ceres, which is Ceres, okay, because I get him, I don't want you to get confused with Cirrus, which is Circe. So, but this is Ceres, the mom, and she's running with Hephaestus, which I'm trying to find where it is, and I don't think I have it on this. See, it's funny, when I changed softwares, it changed. Oh no, wait a minute. That actually, I'm wrong. That's going to show up with my next thing we're going to look at. So let me circle that. That's with the Neptune. So I'm going to do 2 very important axes to prove a point here. When I look at the midheaven, we have Artemis, which is the hunter, prey. It's animals, wild as well as pets. Ceres, so we could be thinking a lot about our pets right now. Demeter is there, which is the other Ceres. Okay, so you have Demeter, you have Ceres. You see them, one with a little ball, one does not have a little ball. Okay, and at the bottom. And basically, these particular asteroids here are running with this Artemis, which is hunter prey. It's like Diana. It's another Diana asteroid. Those of you who are familiar with the asteroid Diana, it's I would say the male version. But basically, it's that hunter, prey, being hounded, type of energy, but also a focus on animals and maybe the caretaking of animals will come to a lot of people's attention. Also, you know what else is there? And I'm going out just slightly now, is Juno, the partner, which we just talked about. Is it feeding the partner? Is it taking care of the partner? Is it being hounded by the partner? But whatever it is, it's all causing chaos. Okay? So it's just causing chaos. Now, something I want to talk about too is parents are Ceres and Demeter, and Zeus is guns. And in this particular country, that is an issue of parents. The gun issue is huge. But think of this as new beginnings. Think of this as organizing, even using restraint when you need to. That's where Saturn comes in. You know, you need discipline. But it's, and I'm going to talk about what goes across here. So this is an interesting axis right here. So you see here that it's running with this asteroid over here. This is called Hecate. Over here, we have Saturn. But with Saturn, and I wrote it down, we have, as I wrote it because I didn't want to have to look it up, we have, yes, Colleen, what do we have? Oh, Tiffany. Okay, I'm just making sure that I didn't do that on Neptune either, because I did two axes and it gets, yeah, it's Tiff. I did write it down. Okay, so that's justice. Okay, so Hecate is, maybe we have dreams of justice, because Hecate rules birth, death, our dreams, intuition. She was wise. She really was, and she's an entity. Hecate is an archetypal symbol, and she's wise. She is the birth, death. So I'm wondering, you know, then we've got guns. We also have the abortion issue. Across the dial, we're going to begin to see some justice. We're going to see some justice. And I can also tell you that in this country, with the abortion laws alone, there are an incredible amount of lawsuits forming. Women that are now sterile because they were forced to carry fetuses that were not viable. So there's a whole bunch of stuff coming out now that women's health being put at risk. I think there's some legal matters on the issue, and I think Saturn being there is kind of interesting. I also like the Sun Venus, the Sun Poseidon. We're going to hear a lot about this, okay? Now, do we hear things that get worse before they get better? Quite possibly, because of the way the Pluto is. It's a macro thing. But to me, it does ultimately give hope in the bigger picture, because that's a really, really interesting lineup. And it's interesting because, like I say, in another program, I can actually see it, but in this one, it doesn't pull up. I have a lot of asteroids on here that I'm wondering where they are. I have more asteroids than the other program, but there are still some from the other program that didn't make its way through this one. But it's there. Okay. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't. Oh, no, it isn't. It's with Neptune. Yeah, sorry about that. It is with Neptune. I keep doing that. It's a big mistake. So it isn't. It is on this one. It's here, and it's going to show up with Neptune. All right. So it's in the Neptune axis. You are going to see them directly across from each other. Let me go to that Neptune axis, because though this Aries axis is really interesting, when you look at Neptune, which is literally about 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees away from. Now, if you're doing Uranian, some Uranians will go out 2.5 degrees. I don't, but you see it now. There it is. Boom, boom. There it is. Boom, boom. Sorry about that confusion on the Aries point. It's not in the Aries point. However, look at how it pulls in Pluto. Look at how it pulls in the nodes. It pulls in that midheaven again, that Vesta, and look at it's going to Eris. So let's talk about repeatable themes. Eris is scattered energy. Eris is chaos. And she promotes chaos. And one of the things we talked about right in the Aries point was chaos. So when we go to Neptune, we talk about all the chaos. So you have Poseidon, the higher octave of Neptune, running in the Aries point. Okay, so let me just go back for 2 seconds. This is a problem with me doing two axes very strongly. I'm already upsetting myself. Several things, okay, we want to look at here. Blood pressure. I believe, and I think I wrote it down, please watch your blood pressure. Everybody. Okay, because the surprises that you're going to be experiencing through this time. Pandora equals Medusa, so some evil surprises will be incredibly nasty, but they will be stressful. Watch your blood pressure as Zeus is hanging out in that Aries point. And that's like inflammation, guys. That's inflammation. So anyone that has issues with inflammation, what do you have at the Aries point? And that inflammation is equaling Saturn, which could be things that happen as we get older. So people who have arthritis could have some real bouts of it. People that have stress issues because of things going on in their work, things going on in the structures of their lives, will find this to be true. That would be things like Crohn's disease, because that's an inflammation in the abdominal. That's all Zeus. Okay? That's all Zeus, people. So please be aware of your health. I do medical astrology, so I should start throwing in some of these little, I don't know, helpful hints for our health. So be careful of that, okay? That's really important. And it is going to be the result of things we hear, Mercury, equatorial ascendant. So be careful, okay, that you're not getting so enmeshed in the micro that your blood pressure isn't rising off the charts. I do like the Aries Venus on this again, but it's the kindness is there, the niceness is there. Maybe that's the thing that we could really do to help us with our health, if you will. You know, you have to ask yourself, what is this chart asking us to do with a lot of Poseidon and Neptune and Venus in it? And it's really asking us to have a wider view, to look beyond ourselves. And it's that whole thing about the macro versus the micro. And it is something, there is a lot of Venus and a lot of Poseidon influence, particularly in the Aries point. But although, we can see it's in Neptune as well. But remember that Poseidon and Neptune are, one is a higher frequency of the other. Venus is running with Poseidon, just asking us to look beyond ourselves, to have a more worldwide view is what it's doing. So let's get to this. Okay, I want to go back to Neptune, okay? Because, here's a case where you could look at this chart and you could say to yourself, wow, this is going to be a good time. I mean, we're doing really well with all of these factors in the Aries point, right? Not with Neptune and Poseidon there, because you think it's good, but it's really not. At other times, you're going to think it's awful, terrible, and horrible, but it's really not. You don't know what you can believe. And that comes from even your reactions to things because of that moon, because it's so strong in this particular chart. So let's look at this a little bit. And I got a little bit of notes for this. I do want to point out, starting off, that Chiron and Pandora, so it's a surprise. Some of this stuff that's coming out is a surprise. And that's through the Neptune. So we may be surprised by deceptions, the level of deception, but also the level of compassion. The other factor that is about, here we go, I'm only going about degree, is Clotho, the beginning of. This is the beginning of. And now I'm going to come down here because these asteroids are in play. All right, particularly Melpomene. I had to make up a glyph for that. It's something we use a lot in medical astrology, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think you can use it in anything because it's an indication that things are getting worse. Yep. I think that the more the public resists against, in our country, I'm just going to use this as an example, Christian nationalism or this fascism that's beginning to kind of encroach in some of the state governments and is being resisted by the people is getting worse. But I like that it's running with Hephaestus. Now I can get to Hephaestus. I really wanted to talk about this. Doesn't fit. You know, that's our odd couple. It doesn't fit. You're trying to ram something down the throats of people. It doesn't fit. That's like hearing a story and you know it's not quite true because it doesn't fit. Or two people telling you that they're working together. It doesn't fit. So it's interesting. So we might see odd couples working together, and that could make things worse. And I also got to tell you that Orpheus and Psyche are within a degree of that as well. So let's talk about the stories that could be told here. Remember that this is a Neptune aspect. Okay? Cupido Mercury is, in my opinion, now it's going to be different for everybody, but these are the organizations, Cupido, Mercury News, that are trying to deceive us, that are trying to tell us like this, we're going to do a ban on abortions. I don't think that's ever going to work in this country. I think that people who say that are fools because they're not in keeping with what the people want. So the Hephaestus, it's like, what? Okay. Orpheus is death. It's sadness. And Psyche is, and also, you know, just the death of maybe odd couples. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's the death of an odd situation. So this also, Psyche, refers to emotional wounding. Okay. Now I did make on something else I did talk about when it was in the Aries point, it's like it's come back. Okay. The Psyche is going to go back over the Aries point. That's also does really well for anyone who's a psychic on the internet, for example, because it's really out there in public. But realize that in this particular case, Neptune could be psychic. Remember that Hecate is in with Zeus, so there could be some explosive stuff regarding intuition. So, you know, Poseidon, they could be telling us things. But, you know, this can happen where we kind of, some people already know what's going to happen next. And as sad as though it may be, you know, it's up there. There's been a lot of deception. And I think some of it is going to come to light. And I think that, in and of itself, will be surprising. And it's only the beginning. So there's going to be a lot of what to believe and what not to believe as this stuff begins. Because when the bad stuff comes out, the bad people tend to get worse. So it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I also want to look, what else did I talk? I got to keep moving. Clotho, as I said, conjuncts that. So remember that Clotho is for people who don't think they have to follow the rule. I mean, Chiron. Not Clotho. Clotho is the beginnings. Chiron, okay, and I'm trying to figure out where Chiron is because it's not up here. Okay, here it is. There it is. Okay, So Chiron is also something worth looking at. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah. Okay. I really did a lot of work on this. That's why it's so confusing spitting it out again, because I've done a lot of work. Um, I got to be honest with you. Chiron, um, it's not Neptune that I was concerned about. It's the aspects of the sun and the moon. So Chiron is about people who don't think they need to follow the rules, and that means that we have connections, sun, moon, our connections, that don't think they have to follow the rules. And Cupido Volcanus is about organizations really forcing issues, Volcanus, really putting a lot of pressure on things because, again, they think they're special. So I looked at that because when I was looking at Neptune, it came up. But no, it's not an aspect to Neptune. It's an aspect to the sun and the moon. Boy, I'm making a lot of mistakes. Maybe I shouldn't do so much prep. Um, I'm also going to point out this. Let me go to here. Okay, was there, or was it? No, no, no. Hold on a minute. I think it was here. Let me go back. No. Yep, there it is. Okay. There is a parallel between the moon and Hades. So, like the people. And it could be a deterioration of the people. It could be, illnesses, bacteria, poverty, which is a big deal in a lot of countries right now where the people are so suffering. But please be aware that it also indicates anyone with stomach issues could possibly have a problem. And remember that stomach issues fall into the Aries point. Remember too that here I am going medical on you, but the Neptune is also illness. Okay? I did want to point that out. That was something more mundane, but I needed to do that. Um, because of worry and anguish. And that's one of the reasons we don't want people to worry. Because if you got a stomach issue, it could erupt on you now. Okay, so another thing we want to look at, and I got to figure out where it comes in. There, okay. I went to Chronos because a lot of the stuff in America is really dealing with the authorities. But if you think about it, Israel and there's a lot of countries rebelling against their authorities. So I thought, let's take a peek. It's the solstice, right? And I was kind of happy to see this. You see this Mercury here, and it's equaling a decision. What is that? Hold on a minute. Hold on. I got to go back. Okay. Yes. Hold on. What did I just do? Oh boy, here we go. By the minute, by the degree. Nope. Yeah, it's really close. Okay. So Mercury Jupiter is that somebody's going to be talking a lot. Okay. And it's an authority figure. I had to play with the dial, if you notice, to get there, but it's very close. And whoever it is humiliating themselves by trying to stir up competition, I guess, strife with competition. And by the way, we do have the 24 presidential, particularly Republican nominee thing starting, and it's already ugly. With this, we have, see if I wrote this all down. It's okay. First of all, we're looking at blind justice. We're looking at the fact that authority figures can be impartial. That's the line to Vesta. I'm using Vesta. Look, first of all, let me go there. Okay. I'm using Vesta, okay, which is running, as you know, very close to that midheaven, which is also Sedna, okay? And this is, it can be good because there is an impartiality toward justice. But it also means that when justice happens, you're just a number. Or when authorities deal with us, they're not, we're like nameless, okay? So that's what that can relate to. All right? That Chronos. Now, Chronos is running with some asteroids here, and I should really keep moving because there's something else, there's some more things I need to talk about. Hopi, Shiwa. So Hopi's territorial. Shiwa says it's destruction for the sake of reconstruction. It's also the idea of withdrawing. Okay, for some withdrawing. So there will be some authority figures who seem to withdraw from things to remain impartial. We can see that in this country. Biden is very impartial about what happens to Trump. Doesn't really affect him. So he's been very impartial. The memory aspect is there. So I think we're dealing a lot with things that are remember this, remember that. Okay? So that's going to be coming to our attention as well. This video is filled with so many mistakes. I don't know, I should have to do it over, but I have to clarify something. This was not melpomene. This is melpomene. So things are actually getting worse for authority figures or an authority figure. And this is going to be true regardless, okay? Because this is all based in Chronos. This is not based necessarily on the United States chart. Down here, and the reason why I use nastiness in my notes, because I didn't make a mistake in my notes, was nastiness is Medusa. And remember when I said to you that that it would be nasty? Yeah, things are getting worse. It's getting nasty. I did want to clarify that. I don't even know my own glyphs. I had to put the fancy schmancy M as Medusa, okay, which is an asteroid. And melpomene, and Medusa is this weird shape. Okay, see, I'm still doing it. I'm still confusing them. I really apologize for my disorganization today. I was almost too prepared. Okay, so let's talk about what that means, okay? So we got an impartiality, but things are getting worse for somebody. And we see the territorials. And I can tell you, boy, I can so see this in the United States with Trump. I can declassify them just by thinking it. You see that territorial. They're mine. Okay. Shiwa is the destructive quality of all of this, but it's also for the purpose of reconstructing. I wish he would withdraw, but I don't think that's what it is. I think it's more the destructive concepts of Shiwa than it is the withdrawing. But realize that it could be withdrawing in another country. Another leader might make the right decision to withdraw from something. So that could be a possibility. I like the way that memories there kind of indicates that these are things that we can draw right from our memory. So that's really good. The next thing I really, really want to talk about, okay, is, wow, this. Now let's make it more. Yeah, let's make it. Okay, so here we have Uranus, but we also have Mars. There it is. No, not there. I want to try to get them both, you know. It's just, they're both there. Hold on. I got to find. I should do it by planet, and that will get us there. So basically what we're looking at here is a Mars-Uranus conjunction. Okay, so there. Mars, no, not too conjunct. Hold on. So we got one at 51 and one at 48. So there's about 3 degrees in there. But I felt it was sort of apropos to some of the issues we're going to have, okay? You know what I'd rather do is the midpoint here of the two. So, because they are so very close. There's about 3, I'm going to say it's not even 3 degrees. See, we got a Venus in there. We got, okay, I want to look at this. Okay, just take this, okay. I'm going to do the math because we have to. By planet. Mars is 4839. So we're going to do this one outright. I did this, but I obviously didn't keep my math. And then this is 21, or 51, I'm sorry. 51, 21 fixed, 19. So we really have I'm going to, literally a 2 degree, about 2 degrees and 30 minutes. A little less, a little more than 30 minutes. So we're really in Uranian territory. Okay, so I'm going to go about 2 degrees. So then we're only going to go about 1 degree. There we go. There it is, Mars Uranus. Okay, so here's my Mars Uranus point and midpoint, and they are still an aspect to each other. It's a 90-degree dial, that's why they look so far apart. They're not the same. Poseidon is much closer to Venus. So, 2.5 degrees, there's still a bit of a distance there. But I'm going to talk about some stuff here. I want to talk about how there could be unexpected losses in securities, that there could be another bank that goes down. I guess that's one of the things I wanted to point out here. But I also want to point out that, look at this Mars with the black moon. Okay, so look at that Mars. So we got this unexpected losses. So let's start with that. Let's form a story here. We have basically we have Mars equaling. Mars is action. Okay, so Mars is our action. But Hidalgo tells us they're not speaking up or speaking out. So here, Mars action, but we're not speaking. It's interesting how those two fell together. So I did a little research on that. This is when people are taking the fifth, when they are angry and give others the silent treatment. It could be that others are challenging someone to come clean about something. People are criticized for what they don't say. As a result of what is being not said, there can be tension. In other words, because of things not coming clean, not all being said, it's going to cause more tension. Some cases, people are being criticized for what they don't own up to. Okay? Not saying is also a way to show you have a different opinion. I've seen that. Just don't say anything because you don't agree. I do that. Restraints may be necessary. So, keeping quiet about a decision or changes. Now, sometimes people do this because they're determined to break rules or laws. So they're not going to say anything. They're just going to do it. We've just had a plane issue, and we know it's DeSantis, okay, sending immigrants across state lines. I believe that is illegal. Now, is he talking about it? No, because he's not going to talk about it. He's not going to admit it because he is breaking rules. However, those things are really easy to, it's a plane, it's got to fill out paperwork and all that stuff. So it's real easy to follow the dots. But I thought that was really interesting. So some of the stuff that I was doing, and I have to be honest, was looking for things that I feel are really relative to what's been going on. Hidalgo is also across the dial from Proserpina, okay? And Proserpina is the idea of doing something on your own. You got to go this journey. You got to do it on your own. The only way it can get done. Going on your own. Being on your own. It's the story of Persephone who has to go to the underground for half a year and then she can come back for half a year. But it is that journey that we do on our own. And really, right now, people are keeping things to themselves because the things they're keeping can cause alienation or separation. And here we go with people having different opinions from other people. At other times, people don't want to talk about things because another is facing a difficult transition. Like, I've seen this happen. I don't really want to talk about this particular issue going on in my life because you have so much going on in yours. I don't want to do that. Sometimes sometimes we have to go through things. Like, in other words, maybe I'm not going to say anything because you know what? I have to do this on my own anyway. This is my journey. And for me to go use other people for soundboards might not be necessary. Okay. So sometimes we're keeping our mouth shut because the other person is going through the journey. And sometimes we keep our mouth shut because we're going through a journey. And that's really important. The other thing I wanted to point out is Ganymede. Okay. And Ganymede, here it is. See, Ganymede falls in with that Mars stuff and that Shiva. So it's right with Shiva. It's like right there. And basically, what that means is it talks about enabling and codependencies. So when we think about how we are or aren't saying anything, is it a part of the codependencies? Is it a part of those enabling? You know, I'm not going to really say anything. I'm going to let them do this on their own. But is that enabling that person? I don't know. We really need to think about that, don't we? So this was a rather long one. I apologize. It got a little bit long. I apologize for all the errors. I was over prepared. And with that said, I'm going to leave you as I always do, that until we meet again, I wish you only happy reading.